Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place so soaked in jasmine perfume and backstabbing politics, it makes high school seem like a meditation retreat. You're about to become a concubine in Imperial China, a title that sounds luxurious until you realize it's just a gilded cage scented with fear. You'll be swaddled in silk, yes, but also in rules, surveillance, and the suffocating knowledge that your beauty is both your shield and your curse. You're not royalty. You're not even technically a wife. You're a woman handpicked to please an emperor you've never spoken to, competing for his gaze in a palace that feels more like a war zone disguised as a garden. Oh, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time down below. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The walls of the Forbidden City gleam with red lacquer and golden roof tiles. They look soft in the moonlight, almost inviting. But as you pass through the final set of gates, a chill settles in your chest. You've heard the rumors. Everyone has. Girls disappear behind these doors and are never seen again. Not because they're dead, though some are, but because they're transformed, rebranded, rewritten. You're one of several girls being escorted inside by silent eunuchs, each of them robed identically in stiff navy and black. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to. Your footsteps echo in carefully timed unison with the others. One stumbles slightly. No one helps her. She's quietly removed. Welcome to the inner court. The scent of sandalwood clings to everything, masking the human tension that thickens the air. You're shown to a receiving hall, where senior attendants, older women with faces like carved stone, glance over you with the detached scrutiny of someone picking meat at a market. One makes a note. Your eyebrows are too thick. Another circles your wrists with her fingers. Good bones. Good bloodline. Enough for now. You're not told where you'll sleep. You're told where you won't sleep anywhere near the Emperor. Not yet. You don't know it yet, but your life has just shifted into a rigid clockwork. Every hour is structured. Every gesture has protocol. There are 36 women just like you, and only one of him. The arithmetic here is cruel. In public, you'll wear long robes that hide your shape, but they'll cling to your shoulders just enough to suggest what lies beneath. You'll be trained in the 4 arts: music, calligraphy, painting, and etiquette, but also in how to walk exactly 7 paces behind the Empress, to kneel without creasing your hem, to weep without noise if passed over for selection at night. Selection, that's the word they use. There's a strict hierarchy among concubines with ranks that sound absurdly poetic. Noble lady, pure consort, worthy attendant. Each step upward grants better rooms, more servants, and the increased likelihood of jealousy-fueled sabotage. You, for now, are talented lady, basically a palace intern. Historians still argue whether this system was meant to reward merit, or just keep you too busy competing to ever unite. Spoiler, it worked. Your days begin at dawn with ceremonial washing and silent prayers. You eat plain rice and lotus soup, always served by eunuchs who never meet your gaze. Your name is recorded in a daily logbook. Every movement you make is watched, timed, filed. You're not a person anymore, you're inventory. Still, the walls are beautiful. Murals of dragons coil above you. Cranes and peaches and pine trees adorn the panels in your quarters, all symbols of longevity and purity. Ironically, nothing here lasts, and no one stays pure. The silk sheets are soft, sure, but they're cold at night. And not just from the stone walls, from the loneliness, the waiting. You wonder what your mother is doing back home. She probably still cries herself to sleep, clutching the sash you left behind. She knew what it meant to be selected. She knew what happens to girls who enter the Forbidden City and never come back. You write her name in your mind every night because you're not allowed to write it on paper. Oh, and here's a fun tidbit. Palace tradition requires that you smile at every meal, no matter how bland the food or bitter the company. A downturned face might be reported. Too cheerful, and they'll assume you're plotting something. There's no perfect expression, just degrees of danger. By the end of your first week, your feet are blistered, your voice rarely used, and your hands ache from embroidery that no one will ever wear. But hey, you've survived your first week. That's more than many do. You don't get to volunteer. You're chosen, plucked like a ripe peach at the right moment of bloom, judged by factors that have little to do with who you are, and everything to do with how you look under candlelight. It starts months before you ever enter the palace. Word reaches your village that a new Imperial Concubine selection is underway. It's known as a mui choi, a plum blossom choosing, though there's nothing floral about the process. You're not the only girl paraded before the magistrate's officials, but you are the one whose height, teeth, and family register check all the right boxes. Tall enough, straight back, from a family with no criminal blemishes. Perfect. Your parents react with the exact combination of pride and quiet horror you expect. This could be the biggest honor your family has ever received. It could also mean you vanish from their lives forever. Either way, you're no longer yours. You're property of the state. The selection journey to the capital is long mostly by cart. Your handlers don't allow talking between candidates. The silence is meant to instill discipline. It works. By the time you arrive at the Forbidden City gates, you no longer even flinch at being inspected like livestock. Then comes the beauty review, a real historical event. You're washed, powdered, and dressed in uniform gauze robes. Your hair is styled in a simple looped bun to keep focus on your bone structure. Each girl is marched before a panel of court ladies' eunuchs, and sometimes even a royal relative. You stand on a slightly raised platform. Turn left, turn right. Bow. Walk backward, then forward. It's like a pageant, but with way worse prizes. You're judged on more than just looks. One girl ahead of you stumbles when bowing. Another lets her eyes dart around nervously. They're both dismissed. No one says where they're going. Your moment arrives. Your palms are sweating, but your expression stays serene. You've practiced in the mirror for weeks, coached by local aunts on how to make your mouth look noble without being haughty. You think it works. One of the ladies scribbles something, then nods. You've made it to the next round. Here's the fringe tidbit. They don't teach in textbooks. There were unofficial rankings based on metaphysical readings. Some emperors employed fortune tellers to read girls' birth charts, ears, or even the lines of their feet. If your signs clashed with the emperor's, you were out even if you had a face like a porcelain doll. Astrology, not biology, could doom you, but you luck out. Your date of birth apparently doesn't scream future betrayer, and your earlobes are deemed auspicious. Congratulations. Your name is now entered into a registry, and just like that, you're property of the inner court. One by one, the chosen girls are paraded past the outer courtyards where actual princesses and high consorts eye you with practiced boredom. You're not competition yet, but if your face haunts the emperor's dreams, one day you will be. You pass the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The building seems to tilt into the sky. Gold everywhere. Yellow tiles, the imperial color, blaze in the sun. You're not allowed to look directly at the throne inside, even though the emperor isn't there. You try not to tremble. Once you cross into the inner court, a ceremonial bell tolls. This is your debut. Your innocence is symbolically surrendered not in action, but in implication. You're told to kneel as a name is read aloud. It isn't your birth name. It's your palace name now bestowed by some clerk in the Ministry of Rites. You are now Lady Yun, or Orchid Breeze, or Petal of Tranquility. Something poetic, generic, and intentionally forgettable. And just like that, you no longer exist outside these walls. Your family is sent a small stipend in rice and silver, a gesture of gratitude from the throne. In reality, it's a payment for their silence. You're not allowed to send letters or receive them, not without imperial approval. So they wait, and wonder, and worry. Historians still argue whether these mass selections were truly about beauty or just a political performance to show imperial control over the female body. Some say it was a way to reinforce the dynasty's divine mandate curating perfection, as if the emperor had access to a celestial dating service. You just know your feet hurt. At night, you're led to your quarters. It's not exactly a cell, it's bigger than most homes outside, but it's bare. A bed, a mirror, a basin. A painted screen with cranes flying above pine trees. A wardrobe you're not allowed to fill yourself. Everything here is chosen for you, from your jewelry down to the specific color of slippers you'll wear for your rank. One of the attendants whispers that girls who aren't summoned within their first month often get sent to serve in menial posts, gardening embroidery, or worst of all, forgotten in distant towers that smell of old rice and broken dreams. You lie on your back that night and stare at the silk canopy above your bed. It has hand-stitched clouds and phoenixes on it. You wonder if the girl who sewed it ended up here like you, and then without realizing it, you start waiting. Waiting to be noticed. Waiting to be summoned. Waiting for a life you didn't choose to somehow become your own. The first thing they take from you isn't your freedom. It's your name. Your old name given to you by your parents, whispered over warm porridge sung softly when you were rocked to sleep, is no longer yours. In its place, you're assigned a new one designed to reflect your rank and role. It might be something like Elegant Willow or Silent Fragrance. Pretty sure, but eerily impersonal, like being named by a poet who's never met you. But that's only the beginning. Names are just the first step in dismantling who you were. From now on, everything about you is curated. What you say, how you move, even how you breathe during formal rituals. You're not just a person anymore, you're a performance. Every gesture must align with the image of calm, controlled elegance that the palace demands. The training begins immediately. You're assigned a mentor, a middle-ranked concubine who hasn't smiled in 5 years and doesn't plan to start now. Her first lesson: never speak unless spoken to, never correct anyone above you, never walk faster than the breeze. You think she's joking. She's not. You learn to kneel with grace, to bow at a precise 45-degree angle, to pour tea without letting the lid clink. You memorize which concubines to address, with what title which eunuchs hold real power, and when to feign ignorance to avoid punishment. Hint often. The palace has a formal curriculum, but it's the informal lessons that keep you alive. No one tells you, for example, that compliments are dangerous. Too many, and people think you're bragging. Too few, and they think you're cold. You walk a tightrope of politeness so narrow, it might as well be drawn with a single hair. Your days become a rotating theater of etiquette classes, calligraphy, practice, embroidery, drills, and posture correction. They make you walk with books on your head, sit on hard stools for hours without shifting. One sneeze too loud and you start over. And it's not just about charm, it's about survival. Because the other women they're watching. Remember, you're not alone in this cage. Dozens of concubines compete for the same limited currency attention. A glance from the emperor, a mention in court. Even a rumor of interest can send your status soaring or nosediving. So you learn how to play the game. Quietly. You keep your voice soft, but not too soft. You learn to laugh like a breeze rustling through reeds, delicate, fleeting, and entirely inoffensive. You never admit weakness, not even when the shoes blister your feet, or when the tight bodice leaves bruises on your ribs. There's a rumor that one of the higher consorts once fainted during an incense ceremony, but didn't let her head hit the floor. That kind of restraint legendary. And here's your quirky historical tidbit of the day. Concubines were sometimes forbidden to eat garlic or leeks, lest their breath offend the emperor. So you learn to smile through a hunger for flavor that will never be satisfied again. Your world narrows to a handful of approved topics: poetry, music, the weather, the beauty of the emperor's latest decree. You hear his name every day but never speak it. That would be unthinkably bold. He is His Majesty, the Dragon Throne, or most delicately, the one who rules all beneath heaven. Historians still argue whether this culture of suppression was designed primarily to keep order or to maintain the illusion that concubines existed purely for the emperor's pleasure, not as people with desires, rivalries, or wit. Either way, the effect is the same. You disappear, little by little, until all that remains is the version of you they created. Still, some parts of you fight to survive. Late at night, after the candles are blown out, you whisper your old name under your breath. Just once. Just to remember. You smooth the quilt over your legs and try to imagine your home, your mother's hands, the smell of steamed buns from your village square. But even memories feel fragile here. There's a subtle hierarchy to the rooms you're assigned. You start in the outer chambers, where the walls are thin and the drafts strong. If you ever gain favor, you might be moved inward, closer to the center of power. For now you're freezing in the mornings, boiling by mid-afternoon, and constantly adjusting to palace time. Palace time is not like real time. It bends around ceremony gossip and unspoken cues. A single nod from the Empress Dowager can shift the entire social weather. And you're learning to read every atmospheric change like your life depends on it, because it does. You overhear two older concubines arguing about whose calligraphy scrolls will be placed in the spring exhibition. They speak in clipped tones layered with barbed compliments. Your brushstrokes are so bold this year. Translation messy. You file that technique away. Passive aggression is practically its own dialect here. One day during scroll inspection, a senior eunuch pauses in front of your work and raises an eyebrow. Not a smile, not a word, but it's the most feedback you've gotten all week. That night, someone leaves a note outside your door. Elegant strokes. But be careful who notices. You fold it carefully and burn it. You're learning. You're surviving, barely. You wake up before the sun again. The mornings blur now, long stretches of gray light, cold water on your face, and whispered orders from senior attendants who have stopped seeing you as human and started seeing you as moving scenery. Today, you're summoned to the Orchid Pavilion, a side hall, where beauty is not just expected, it's enforced. Because today's lesson is about your most important weapon appearance. It isn't enough to be pretty. You have to embody an idealized version of femininity sculpted by centuries of Confucian philosophy, Tang poetry, and a rotating cast of emperor's preferences. Your face is not your own, it's a canvas, and someone else holds the brush. First, hair. Your scalp is scraped clean with a fine-tooth comb. Individual hairs are plucked from your forehead to create the illusion of a higher hairline. That's the standard now. Big foreheads, big brains, or at least the suggestion of wisdom. You wince, but you don't flinch. Flinching gets remembered. Then come the layers. Undergarments, tight silk binding outer robes, then the fengguan, a heavy ceremonial headdress that can weigh up to 10 pounds, adorned with golden phoenixes and freshwater pearls. It's like balancing a dinner platter on your skull while smiling gently and walking as if clouds are beneath your feet. Still, you're told to be grateful. The older girls whisper horror stories from earlier dynasties, women who blackened their teeth or applied powdered lead for a paler face. Some even used crushed pearls mixed with pig fat as foundation. You think that's a joke. It's not. Here's a historical fact you wish were fiction beauty manuals from the Qing dynasty, listed over 100 rules for how a woman should present herself at court. Everything from eyebrows like willow leaves to skin like boiled rice. The idea was not to be a person. It was to be a poem, a painting, a delicate ornament to display, not touch. You learn to tighten your posture so your sleeves drape correctly when kneeling. You learn how to angle your face toward candlelight to make your cheekbones glow softly. You are a walking performance measured in half steps and half smiles. And then there's your feet. Bound since childhood, they are your curse and your currency. The golden lotus ideal still holds sway, tiny feet preferably under 4 inches long. You've spent your life enduring pain so brutal it warped the bones. The palace doesn't care. In fact, it admires your dedication. One court official glances at your embroidered shoes and remarks, "Discipline is a kind of beauty." You want to scream, but instead, you lower your eyes and murmur, "Thank you." This is the dance. Behind you, someone coughs a deliberate signal. A higher-ranked concubine enters the hall. She's one of them, the favorites. Her sleeves are longer, her makeup lighter, because when you're powerful, you don't need to try so hard. And her hair is adorned with a single jade cicada, a symbol of silent wisdom. You curtsy low. She walks past without looking. You envy her and fear her in equal measure. Later that day during calligraphy, a eunuch delivers a scroll of court poems. You're expected to memorize 3 before nightfall. One is a Tang verse about a woman combing her hair, comparing her beauty to plum blossoms falling into a jade pond. You write it 10 times. Your fingers ache. You write it again. And all the while your mind whispers, outshine without outshining. Glow without burning. Be flawless but forgettable. Historians still debate whether concubines like you were passive victims or silent players in a dangerous game of appearances. The truth is more complicated. Some women used beauty as strategy, mastering their look to rise in rank. Others were simply crushed under the weight of it, fading into decorative ghosts. You're trying not to become one of those. That night, you're inspected again. A mid-ranking consort passes you in the corridor and pauses. "Your eyebrows," she says, too arched. "It makes you look calculating." You nod. Say nothing. And that night you pluck them raw. You think back to the girl who arrived with you, Lan, with the dimple. She used to laugh, remember, always humming some folk tune while brushing her hair. You haven't seen her in days. The rumor is she got summoned to a banquet and spilled wine on the emperor's sleeve. She's not gone, but she's been reassigned. Toilet duty in the Northeast Annex. She won't be coming back. Your heart sinks, but your lips stay curved. Because tomorrow is another inspection, and your robe has to be creased in exactly the right way, and your smile has to be gentle, but not empty, and your voice has to sound like spring rain if anyone asks a question. And because if the Emperor ever does look your way, you want to be ready, even if it means becoming someone else entirely. The Empress doesn't need to speak to control you. Her presence alone is enough to make the entire hall drop into silent kneeling. Her robes rustle like a wind passing through silk banners, each embroidered dragon's eye gleaming as if alive. She moves slowly, deliberately, like someone who never worries about being interrupted. You press your forehead to the polished stone floor and try not to tremble. You've only seen her twice before, once at a distance during a ceremonial feast, and once in a passing procession, where even the eunuchs bowed as she walked by. But today she stops. Right here. Right in front of you. She says nothing. You feel her gaze slide over you like a blade testing a whetstone. There's no praise, no reprimand. Just a flick of her sleeve and the faintest incline of her head before she glides on her retinue of palace women and guards flowing after her like the tail of a comet. Only after she's gone do you breathe again. The Empress, after all, is the unspoken sun around which your entire life orbits. She is the only woman who is legally the Emperor's wife, and every other woman in the inner court is technically trespassing in her domain. No matter how favored a concubine becomes, she can never hold the title the Empress does, which is why your survival depends on never drawing her ire. You learn quickly that attention from the Emperor is dangerous if it isn't matched with extreme humility. Too eager and you're ambitious. Too cold and you're disrespectful. Either way, the Empress will hear of it through a vast, quiet web of spies. Oh yes, the palace hums with whispers, but the loudest sound is always silence. Senior palace women, often loyal to the Empress, observe every gesture in the background, who shares glances with who receives extra fruit at breakfast, who's humming when they shouldn't be. Historians still argue whether the Empress truly controlled the concubines, or if her power was more symbolic, a hollow authority behind which eunuchs and favored women pulled the real strings. But in your daily life, she feels omnipresent. You measure your choices by her imagined reaction. One girl's shoe smiled too brightly during a procession. That was it. Just a smile that lingered a heartbeat too long while the Emperor passed. She was reassigned the next day, mending slippers for the eunuch guards. No explanation. You ask nothing. You learn. Still the strangest part, the Empress is not a monster. At least not exactly. She's as much a prisoner of the system as you are, except her cage is lined with diamonds and decorated with ancestral portraits. She was probably chosen as a teenager for her family's political connections. Groomed, married, crowned, then slowly iced over by decades of betrayal, scheming, and ceremonial isolation. Once during a spring festival, you caught a rare glimpse of her alone in the peony garden. She didn't know you were there. She just stood by a stone bench staring into a pond. No guards, no fanfare. And for a flicker of a moment, she looked almost what lost sad real. Then a servant called her, and the spell broke. She turned perfect and unreadable again, and vanished behind the screen of flowering trees. You've never told anyone about that. Another fringe detail that keeps you up at night. The Empress technically has the right to command severe punishments on concubines, including whipping or confinement. And although most emperors prefer to maintain a softer image, they rarely interfere when their primary wife exercises her disciplinary discretion. So when you're summoned to serve tea during a minor feast in her presence, your stomach knots. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because any slip-spilled tea, clumsy, kneeling, mispronounced poetry could be interpreted as disrespect. And disrespect is often punished in whispers and reassignments, not warnings. You enter the dining hall barefoot, as custom demands, and place the porcelain tray with both hands on the lacquered table. Your head is bowed so low your hair brushes the floor. You recite the greeting without trembling. She does not speak, but she accepts the tea. You're dismissed. Later in your quarters, you find a single silk flower on your pillow. No note, no explanation. But it's a magnolia associated with female strength and dignity. It could mean anything or nothing. That's the worst part of court life. You're never entirely sure if something is a threat, a test, or a reward. You just nod politely and continue breathing through it. Each evening when you lie in bed beneath your embroidered quilt, you replay the day in your head like a chess game. Did you bow at the right moment? Did your robe brush against someone above your rank? Did you smile too much at the musicians? You begin to evaluate your own existence by potential punishments rather than pleasures. And even though the Empress barely speaks to you, she becomes the mirror through which you examine your own posture, silence, and composure. She's not just the highest-ranking woman in the palace. She is the ghost you perform for. You don't trust anyone now. Not even the girl who shares your water basin. Every smile hides an angle. Every gift carries a motive. And every silk-sleeved gesture is weighed not in sincerity, but in strategy. In this palace, kindness is often a trap bait on a jade hook. You've entered the phase they don't write about in poetry. The quiet war. It's not fought with swords, but with sideways glances, rumors poisoned kanji, and mysteriously vanished slippers before a banquet. It's the game of schemes in silk, the private perfumed battlefield of the inner court. One morning you discover a tiny tear in your ceremonial robe. You're sure it wasn't there yesterday. A careless servant, perhaps, or a careful enemy. You report it and are told coldly that negligence is unbecoming of a lady of your rank. You weren't negligent, but it doesn't matter. Later that week, a string of pearls goes missing from your jewelry box. You're questioned, not because they think you stole them, but because they want to see how you react. A test of your expression, of your innocence, of your composure. You pass, barely. Your roommate May isn't so lucky. She's accused of spreading false rumors about a higher-ranked concubine's affair with a eunuch, an accusation that could get her killed even if it's true. Or especially if it's true. She denies it, but the court doesn't need proof, only precedent. She's reassigned to the kitchen, a polite way of saying she's been discarded. Historians still argue whether these inner palace intrigues were encouraged to keep the women busy, or simply a natural product of isolation and powerlessness. You don't care anymore. You just know you wake each day and scan your room for subtle changes, for missing trinkets, for notes that weren't there before. And then there's the art of poison by suggestion whispers, just audible enough to be heard, but too faint to be traced. One girl is said to have looked too long at the emperor during prayer. Another is accused of hoarding silk, though no proof is ever found. Once you hear your own name in the garden breeze. That one someone murmurs behind a fan keeps to herself too much. Dangerous. You say nothing. But later that night you slip a small gift, a painted sachet of dried lavender, onto the bed of the girl who spoke. Not as a thank you, as a warning I heard you too. That's how it works. Not open hostility, not honest confrontation, but layered meanings wrapped in brocade and delivered with a bow. A fringe historical tidbit, it was common for concubines to exchange coded gifts, small objects that held meaning only they understood. A pine cone could suggest endurance, a plum blossom elegance, a dried frog good luck, or bad omen depending on who received it. One girl sends another a painted scroll of a tiger. Everyone knows what that means, you're being watched. The eunuchs are no help. Some align themselves with specific consorts, trading favors and information for influence. Others pretend neutrality, but you know better. Their silence is not innocence, it's protection. One old and stone-faced begins leaving you an extra plum during meals. You're unsure what it means, but you eat it every time, slowly, with deliberate grace, just in case he's watching. And he is. You learn to speak in layers, to smile in riddles, to gossip about gossip in a way that shields you from blame but keeps you relevant. You laugh at the right jokes. You feign admiration for the Empress's calligraphy, even though it's clearly done by a court artist. You compliment the tea's fragrance when you know the tea hasn't changed in 3 months. Because in this world, visibility is currency. But too much of it burns. It's a tightrope of shadows. Your only real refuge is late at night, when the corridors are silent, and you sit by your window staring into the courtyard's stone lanterns. Fireflies drift between the pines. The moon traces the same arc it did in your village. And for a few moments, you allow yourself to breathe. You remember Lon. You remember May. You remember the girl who arrived with you bright-eyed and naive, holding her sleeves too tightly. She's gone now. In her place is someone who knows how to glide silently, who knows which consort favors which incense, who knows that when someone says, "You look radiant today," it might mean you're being watched or targeted. You haven't just adapted, you've evolved. You're not the cleverest, or the prettiest, or the most adored, but you're still here. And in this place, that's everything. Tonight you might be summoned. You feel it in the way your name is spoken, softer, with a touch of curiosity. You catch the faint glance from a eunuch during evening prayers. No words are exchanged, but that half-second pause means something. It always does. And then the order arrives. Not from the emperor himself, of course, never directly. A quiet eunuch appears at your doorway holding a lacquered tray. On it rests a single red jade token, engraved with the seal of the dragon throne. Your heart skips, then plummets. You've been chosen. There's no preparation time. You're led immediately to the preparation hall, where 2 senior attendants begin the ritual of cleansing. They don't speak. You're stripped, bathed in warm, lotus-scented water, and dressed in freshly steamed silk. Your hair is oiled and brushed until it gleams. Not a pin is left in place. Not a single fold is unmeasured. Then comes the most humiliating part. They inspect your body, not for beauty, but for marks, flaws, bruises. You're a vessel now, and vessels must be pristine. A faint scratch on your shin earns a cluck of disapproval and an herbal salve. No one asks how you got it. No one cares. Your breath catches when they anoint you with ambergris and sandalwood oil, a scent reserved only for those entering the imperial bedchamber. It's rare, expensive, and terrifying. It means you're about to be remembered or discarded. You're wrapped in a gauzy outer robe that barely conceals you. And then with your hands clasped, you're walked barefoot through a hidden corridor, lit by oil lamps, your shadow stretching behind you like a silent witness. The walk feels eternal. You pass beneath red pillars, past sleeping pavilions, past stone lions that glare at you like judges. You try not to shake. You think about your mother, your village, the last dumpling you ever ate that wasn't served on porcelain. The bedchamber door looms ahead. Inside, it's nothing like the legends. There's no pile of silk pillows, no fragrant petals strewn across marble. Just an ornate bed, a carved screen, and a faint draft that sends goosebumps down your arms. The Emperor is already inside, seated in shadow. You bow low, hold it, and wait. You hear the rustle of fabric, the sound of something being poured. Then the quietest laugh, like he's amused by something you can't see. Then a word. Your name. The new one. Spoken not with fondness but curiosity, like a child observing an insect. You're beckoned forward. The ritual is not romantic. It's formal, silent, and deeply awkward. You're not here to connect. You're here to perform, to leave an impression, but not too strong of one. Favor is as dangerous as disfavor. You've practiced this moment in your head, but reality is much colder. You're dismissed without eye contact. Two eunuchs reappear almost instantly, handing you a fresh robe and guiding you wordlessly back to your quarters. No one tells you what it meant. If it meant anything at all. You're told to sleep. You don't, because tomorrow everyone will know. They'll smell the ambergris. They'll see the difference in your hair, your posture. They'll smile too politely, bow a little deeper, or avoid you completely. You've become something they both envy and fear. And here's the strange, uncomfortable historical truth: being summoned didn't guarantee favor. Some women were chosen once, forgotten forever. Others rose through sheer charisma. A few were deliberately ignored for years, then suddenly brought back into the Emperor's circle, based on dreams, omens, or sheer boredom. Historians still debate whether the Emperor truly cared about these encounters, or merely treated them like obligation ritual or entertainment. Some emperors kept detailed records of each knight's companion. Others forgot names by morning. You don't know where yours falls on that spectrum, but you know you feel changed. And not in the way the ballads describe. You thought you'd feel powerful, elevated, chosen. Instead, you feel like a silk handkerchief held examined, then folded away without comment. The next day, your schedule changes, slightly. A better breakfast, a newer set of robes, a small promotion in rank, subtle but unmistakable. And with it comes fresh danger. Now others are watching you more closely. The ones who once whispered beside you now fall silent when you enter. The ones who ignored you now offer compliments laced with suspicion. One girl sends you a box of candied plums, sweet on the tongue, but you throw them away. You've learned. Too many girls have fallen ill after such gifts. That night you lie awake and try to remember the Emperor's face. You can't. All you see is the room, the ritual, the weight of a gaze that didn't quite land, the silence after. You realize in this world being seen can be a form of erasure too. And yet, when the eunuch enters again 3 nights later, holding another red jade token, you accept, because the alternative is to disappear. Your stomach turns every time the soup arrives. The porcelain bowl is lovely blue and white, with tiny cranes etched along the rim. It's always steaming, always fragrant, and always terrifying. Because now you're pregnant. The physician confirmed it this morning, after a discreet visit to your chamber. He checked your pulse, your eyes, your scent. Yes, your scent, and gave the slightest nod. Then he wrote your name into the red register and left. That nod changed your life, not for the better. Pregnancy in the Forbidden City isn't sacred. It's strategic. Your body just became a battlefield, your unborn child a chess piece. The other concubines know. Of course they do. Word moves faster than sound in these walls. At breakfast, the gazes linger longer. Some with icy calculation, some with thinly veiled envy, a few with a flicker of sympathy. You try to act normal. You sit straight, pour tea, pretend your hands aren't trembling. But you've entered a new game now, one that has killed women for far less. Because here's the brutal truth. An imperial pregnancy threatens every woman not carrying that child. If your baby's a boy, he could become heir. And that means promotions, wealth, protection for you. But it also means demotions, exile, or execution for others. So the poisoning begins. Not always literally. Sometimes it's subtle, stepping on an icy path someone forgot to salt. Sometimes it's medicine swapped by an overly helpful maid. One woman reportedly lost her baby after eating a single preserved date from the wrong dish. You hire a food taster, a mute girl. Her tongue is stained from testing everything you touch, rice broth, even fruit. You watch her like a hawk, and still you worry. Your dreams are filled with flames, with shadows clutching at your belly, with shrill laughter and blood on your sleeves. You stop trusting the eunuchs. You stop trusting the attendants. You stop trusting your own reflection. The emperor hasn't summoned you since the news. That's normal. Concubines aren't called while pregnant. But still, the silence eats at you. Was he pleased? Does he remember your name, or have you already become a footnote? Some emperors doted on their pregnant favorites. Others viewed them as ticking time bombs and kept their distance. Historians still argue whether the aloofness was personal or purely political. You're left alone with your thoughts, and with an ever-growing list of things you cannot eat, drink, smell, or even touch. No ginseng, no green plums, no saffron, not even cinnamon bark. You miss cinnamon more than you miss sunlight. Your daily walk is reduced to 10 steps along a cloistered hallway, always under guard. You aren't even allowed to bathe alone anymore. Modesty disappears. Privacy dies. A physician visits every 3 days. Different one each time. None of them look you in the eye. They poke your belly like you're a melon at market, make notes, whisper to the eunuchs, and vanish. But you're not just scared. You're angry, because for once your body is doing something you didn't orchestrate. No rival poisoned you. Empress punished you. No eunuch manipulated you, and still you're in danger. It's infuriating, unfair, and also hopeful. There's a chance this baby could be your future. If it survives. If you survive. You run your hands over your belly every night, whispering things your own mother once told you. Stories about mountain tigers and clever foxes. You try to ignore the fear in your own voice. You try to sound like a mother. It helps sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. You start sleeping with a hairpin tucked in your sleeve, not to defend yourself, but to hold on to something sharp, something real, something not wrapped in embroidered lies. And still the danger grows. One night a maid accidentally leaves your incense burner smoldering too close to the drapes. You wake coughing, the room full of smoke. Another night your tea tastes faintly bitter, but the food taster insists it's fine. You pretend to sip it and pour the rest into the planter. Paranoia becomes routine. You taste your own fear more often than your food. And then something unexpected happens. The Empress sends you a gift, a bolt of lavender silk, a carved jade rattle, and most surprising of all, a handwritten note. It says simply, "May your child bring peace." You stare at it for hours. What does it mean? Is it sincere? Is it a veiled warning? One of your friends, if you can still call her that, whispers that the Empress had a son once. Long ago, he died. Some say it was fever. Others suggest sabotage. Historians have never agreed. Some blame court politics. Some blame the Empress herself. Some say it's all myth. You don't know the truth. You just know that now she's watching you closely, so you bow when you pass her portrait. You avoid eye contact with anyone ranked above you. You keep your meals plain. You stay quiet. You count the days on the edge of your embroidery, one pink stitch at a time. When the baby finally kicks for the first time, you cry. Not out of joy, out of terror. Because now the stakes are real, and you're still just a concubine. You're cradling your belly like it's made of porcelain. Which in a way it is, because if this baby breaks, so do you. The palace midwives begin visiting. You're measured, prodded, scented, and charted like a rare fruit. They track everything, your appetite, your sleep, even your dreams. Yes, dreams. One believes bad omens show up in nightmares. You lie and say yours are peaceful. They aren't. You've dreamt of weeping statues, of your child's crib filling with water, of empty arms. You're 8 months in when the whispers start circling. Not about you this time, but about another concubine. Younger, prettier, and newly pregnant. You feel the tension tighten like a corset. Suddenly, you're not the only woman expecting. That means everything shifts. The attention, the danger, the hierarchy. You're no longer the Emperor's current miracle, you're just one possible future. And in this place, there's only room for one rise. You've heard the stories, everyone has, about the woman in the Tang court who gave birth to twins and was accused of faking it to gain favor. She disappeared within a week. Or the Song Dynasty concubine whose child was born sickly, and the next day both mother and baby were sent to a monastery. No one heard from them again. You try to focus on the one thing that might save you a healthy male child. That's the golden ticket. A daughter, you might get a thank you fruit basket. A stillbirth, you might get nothing at all. But a son, then you become a mother of the Emperor's bloodline. Possibly even Empress Dowager someday, if everything goes exactly right. If you survive. If he survives. If nobody poisons anyone along the way. You still eat with a taster. Still pray with a wet nurse. Still sleep lightly and never near an open window. Yes, accidental falls have happened before. You've read the court records, when they haven't been erased. When labor finally begins, it's not like the poems. There's no soft music, no lavender steam. There's just pain, sharp and mean, and a small crowd of strangers peering between your knees, muttering things in tones too polite to be helpful. You scream, you bleed. You think for a moment you might leave your own body. A eunuch faints. That's the only part you laugh at. It takes hours. You lose track. You pray. Not to heaven, not really, but to your mother. Your real mother whom you haven't seen in over a decade. You whisper her name, not the gods, while you push. Then crying. Tiny, furious crying. And it's a boy. They announce it like a weather report. No warmth. No excitement. Just a male. The midwife nods, records it, and wraps him in brocade. You barely register the word before the panic rushes in. Now the danger really begins. Because with a son, you've just gained power, and power in this place is a flashing red target. You hold him and feel the shift in the air. Servants bow deeper. Eunuchs become more cautious. The Empress sends porridge laced with ginseng and a jade pendant half blessing, half leash. Your friends bring gifts. One offers a talisman which you immediately burn after she leaves. You sleep with the baby tied to your chest. Literally. There's a cloth sling hidden under your robe so no one can snatch him from your side in the night. Because yes, that's happened too. A Ming Dynasty concubine once lost her baby while she slept. Supposedly, a wet nurse rolled over him. Other accounts hint that the child was smothered intentionally so another woman's son could inherit. Historians still argue over what actually happened. All you know is that it could happen again. Your milk dries up after 2 weeks. Stress, they say. But a whisper suggests someone slipped something in your soup. The emperor hasn't visited, of course. Men don't attend births. Still, he sends a gift, a scroll with a brush-painted poem about cranes and immortality. You wonder if he even wrote it himself. You wonder if he even remembers your name. But you don't care, not really. Because now you have your son. He doesn't smile yet. Just stares up with eyes that don't quite focus, mouth twitching like a rabbit's. You hum to him anyway. Songs from home. You pretend he knows the words. A senior consort visits you. She's old enough to have grandchildren, though none call her mother. She peers down at the child and murmurs, "Protect him from the women. The men, they're obvious." You don't reply, but you remember. Every night you light a tiny oil lamp, not for warmth, for watching. You sleep only when your eyes can no longer stay open. And in your dreams, still the crib overflows with water. Your son is healthy, you less so. You're officially promoted. A new rank, a new title, a new room filled with heavier curtains and fewer people. It's technically a reward, but in practice it feels more like house arrest. You used to hear gossip and laughter through the corridors. Now you hear your own thoughts bouncing off silk-lined walls. This is what it means to be in favor. You get better food, better clothes. The maids bow lower and fetch faster. But also more rules, more rituals, more eyes watching from behind fans and doorway shadows. It's like being upgraded from a noisy prison cell to a very pretty lonely one. The other concubines keep their distance now. Some nod stiffly in the corridors. Others refuse to acknowledge you at all. You've shifted from peer to problem. You're told your son is being well cared for in the nursery ward, which is located in a part of the palace you're not allowed to enter. Not anymore. That's right, they take him. The nursemaids say it's for his safety, his health, his future. But you know what it really is, it's control. As long as he's not in your arms, you can't use him as leverage. You can't sway him. You can't even feed him. So you see him only on scheduled occasions, supervised like a foreign visitor. You try to memorize every moment the fuzz on his head, the little crescent-shaped birthmark near his ear, the way his fingers curl instinctively when you hold out your hand. Each visit ends too fast. Each goodbye feels like a theft. One evening you try to bribe a maid for an unscheduled glimpse. She refuses quietly, politely, and with real fear in her eyes. You don't try again. You start writing poems. Not the kind you learned in your girlhood. These are sharper, colder, written in metaphor so twisted even you forget what you meant halfway through. But it helps, a little. You also begin having dreams, this time of your son grown up wearing yellow robes, looking at you with blank detachment. In one dream, he walks past you without recognizing you at all. You wake up sobbing into a brocade pillow that smells like sandalwood and betrayal. The older consorts warn you favor is a fire. It warms, then it burns. You believe them now. The emperor summons you again once. It's ceremonial, predictable. He smells faintly of cloves and boredom. You say all the right things. You wear the right jewels. You smile just enough to look grateful, but not ambitious. You know it's not about you anymore. It's about the child you gave him. Still, for that one night, you are allowed to matter again. Historians still argue whether concubines with sons ever truly held power, or if they were merely vessels used, elevated, then discarded as soon as their usefulness dimmed. Some point to the legendary Wu Zetian, who rose from concubine to empress. Others argue she was the exception that proved the rule. You're no Wu Zetian. You're just a woman who got lucky, terrifying, high-stakes, isolating luck. You're invited to join the inner circle of higher-ranked concubines. It sounds glamorous, but mostly it means attending long, chilly ceremonies where you offer tea and compliments to women who silently compete to outmourn each other's misfortunes. There's a hierarchy even here. One woman has birthed 3 children, but none lived past age 2. Another has been a favorite for decades, but never bore a son. They look at you with expressions you can't quite read: envy, maybe, or pity. One gives you a gift, a lotus carved from ivory. You thank her. Later, you drop it. The stem snaps in half. Some days you feel you're being tested. Other days you know the test already ended, you passed, and still there's no graduation. You notice the little things. The slow shift in how the eunuchs address you. The way the Empress's messages now end with your compliance is appreciated. The sudden absence of your favorite maid, no explanation. You ask nothing. You say nothing. You learn silence is its own language here, and so you wait. You smile at your scheduled visits with your son. You light incense to ancestors you barely remember. You speak in metaphor, sleep in armor, and move through halls like a ghost wearing perfume. Your name, once spoken in hopeful whispers back home, is now inked in palace records, and only if you're lucky. The seasons blur now. Autumn folds into winter without ceremony, and spring arrives without warmth. You stop noticing the birds returning, or the shift in floral arrangements. Everything inside the palace remains eerily unchanged, eternally fragrant, eternally gilded, and emotionally frozen. You're still young technically, but you don't feel it. Days pass in long, delicate routines. You rise before dawn. You bathe in water steeped with chrysanthemum petals. You recite poetry during meals because silence is frowned upon and open talk is dangerous. Your voice has become soft from disuse, like silk that's been folded too long. You've started writing poetry again, not the sharp, angry verses of before, but quiet, elegiac ones. You hide them between the pages of religious texts where no one looks too closely. One poem compares your heart to a palace lantern glowing only when someone walks by. You remember your family less and less. That used to feel like betrayal. Now it feels like preservation. If you let yourself recall too much the way your younger brother laughed, the smell of street dumplings, you might fracture. So instead, you imagine your mother is still alive, that your father's shop still opens each morning, that someone out there still whispers your real name. Of course you haven't heard your birth name in years. Here you are, consort gentle reign, or ranked lady of the 4th hall. Names like perfumes pretty but not quite real. Your son is walking now. During your tightly controlled visits, he babbles words, some of which sound like yours. His nursemaids smile like proud mothers. You want to hate them, but they've raised him while you were trapped in embroidery lessons and etiquette performances. You consider asking for more time with him, but you know the risks show too much attachment, and they'll fear ambition. Show too little, and they'll claim you're unfit. You try to walk the razor's edge between love and discretion. Some nights you dream that he forgets you. Other nights you forget him. Once while walking through the plum blossom garden, you hear a zither playing. You follow the sound, thinking it's one of the young concubines practicing. Instead, you find an older woman, white-haired, hunched, but graceful. She was once like you. She plays without sheet music, eyes closed. You sit beside her. Neither of you speaks. When she finishes, she turns to you and says, "I had 3 sons. One died in war, one in sickness, and one became a minister who never visits." Then she adds, "We're always remembered, just not the way we hoped." Later, you find out her name was never recorded in official lineage books. Her entire identity lives in footnotes and half-legends. Historians still argue whether concubines had any lasting cultural influence, or if their impact died with the last breath of the men who once summoned them. Some mention the famous calligraphy of certain imperial women. Others believe most concubines became forgotten ghosts long before they died. You feel that truth in your bones. To keep sane, you create tiny rituals. You count the steps from your bed to the outer chamber each morning 7. You trace invisible patterns on your sleeve hem during prayers. You collect dried lotus pods and arrange them into secret sculptures behind your dressing screen. You pretend these rituals give you control. Once during the Lantern Festival, you're allowed to write a wish on a paper balloon. The other women write things like health or peace. You write a single word voice. Then you release it into the smoky sky and never see it land. You wonder if it made it over the walls. There are moments of warmth. A younger concubine brings you a silk bookmark stitched with your birth constellation. An old maid leaves you sugared almonds by mistake. Sometimes you hear laughter in the distance and allow yourself to believe it's yours. But mostly there is silence. A few concubines try to catch the emperor's attention again. You see them rehearsing smiles, composing poems, consulting herbalists for skin-brightening concoctions. You don't bother. You've learned that favor is not about effort. It's about timing and whim. One morning you hear that a new girl from the western provinces has been promoted. She's 16. She recites poetry with a mountain accent. The emperor finds it charming. You feel nothing. You ask to visit the palace library. It's one of the few requests granted without suspicion. There, among scrolls on military tactics and celestial patterns, you find stories written by long-dead women. Some are anonymous. Others use only a single character for a name. You begin copying their lines into a secret book you bind with your own hair. You call it your true record. No one will read it. But it exists, and so you do. He doesn't look at you anymore. Once your name on the roster made court ladies turn their heads. Now when you're summoned, which is rare, it's administrative and inventory of your belongings, a ceremonial nod at your rank. You're still officially in favor. Technically. But even that word favor feels strange in your mouth now. Like something you read about in another woman's story. The emperor has new favorites. Of course he does. One is called Lady Dewdrop, which sounds ridiculous until you see her. 17, with a laugh like water over porcelain, and the audacity of someone who's never suffered. She's everything you once were, bright, cautious, desperately hopeful. You watch her flutter down the corridors in peony pink robes, swarmed by eunuchs and sycophants. And you feel oddly gentle. Not jealous, not bitter, just tired. You see yourself in her, and you know how that story ends. She doesn't yet understand that favor rots, that the same sweet fruit that once delighted the emperor will sour curdle and be tossed aside with ceremony. No one warns her, of course. Why would they? That part of the cycle is always a surprise until it isn't. Your body aches more now. The beauty rituals are still mandatory, but the powders feel heavier on your skin. The blush no longer blends so easily. When you smile, the corners of your mouth tug differently. One of your maids offers to try a peach oil balm said to renew softness. You laugh and wave her off. You no longer need to pretend. The younger girls still curtsy as you pass, but it's out of habit, not admiration. You've become part of the palace furniture, respected, ignored, quietly dusted. One afternoon during embroidery duty, you overhear 2 girls whispering behind a screen. One says, "She used to be the favorite, you know." The other replies, "Really, I thought she was just a widow of the old reign." You're still alive. That night, you stare into the bronze mirror for a long time. You barely recognize the woman looking back. She seems elegant, poised, slightly sad. She could be a noble woman from any dynasty. And then you realize she could be anyone. You've become generic. Even the Empress stops acknowledging you. It's not cruelty, it's strategy. Attention is dangerous. You're no longer a threat or an asset. You're a smudge on the calligraphy scroll noticed only by those who study too closely. Historians still argue whether older concubines held secret influence behind the scenes. Some claim they became spiritual advisors or foster mothers to heirs. Others insist they were simply warehoused, maintained, but unused like ceremonial robes from a past reign. You know the truth lies somewhere in between. You exist in the cracks. Your son, now 10, has been assigned a tutor with ambitions. When you visit, the boy is stiff formal. He bows too deeply, calls you honored lady. You reach to touch his hair, and he flinches not from fear, but habit. He's already learning how to survive here. Afterward, you walk alone through the jade garden. The magnolia trees are blooming. You think absurdly that they look like ghosts of hands open-reaching, then gone. You pass a servant girl who smiles at you. You nod. She lowers her eyes. She'll be here soon enough. That night you find one of your poems, your real ones, has been stolen. Likely by a maid, maybe to sell. You're furious at first, but then strangely pleased. If someone reads your words, they might remember you, even if it's out of context, even if it's misattributed. At least something of you lives beyond this silk-wrapped cage. There are rumors of rebellion in the provinces. Some say the emperor may move the court. Others whisper that certain concubines are being moved for safety. You don't bother to ask. If they want you gone, you'll know when they send the carriage. You've stopped dreaming in color. Most nights you dream of floating downriver in a red silk boat. No one steering. The palace shrinks behind you, and ahead is nothing but mist. In the morning you light incense and whisper to the goddess of mercy. Not for freedom, just for stillness. One afternoon, a young eunuch delivers a plate of candied plums. A simple gift forgotten by most. You chew one slowly. The taste explodes, sweet, tart, alive. You close your eyes. For a moment, you remember everything. The first one to go is Lady Orchid. One morning, she's in the garden, playing the guqin under a crabapple tree. That evening, her quarters are sealed. Her name scratched from the visitation rolls. No explanation. No mourning period. Just silence. You ask your maid what happened, but she only whispers. Kitchen staff say it was a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Then adds more quietly, or poison in her chrysanthemum tea. You've heard both versions before. Nosebleeds, sudden chills, a cut that won't clot. Sometimes it's illness, but more often it's rivalry. See, death in the harem rarely comes with ceremony. There's no fanfare, no bloody dagger in the dark. Just a plate delivered a little too warmly. A scented sachet that smells off. A hairpin pricking too deep into the scalp. Every object in your world could be a weapon, subtle, silent, deniable. And the worst part, you start to understand why. Favor is a finite resource. And in this gilded prison, every woman is either a step on your ladder or a hand pulling you back down. Sooner or later, the desperation simmers over. You remember Lady Peach Blossom. She'd always seemed too fragile, too soft-hearted for court life. Then one day, she accidentally spilled boiling oil on a rival's hands. Claimed she tripped. The girl was demoted. Peach Blossom was promoted. She cried the whole time. Historians still argue whether such internal violence was orchestrated by palace officials or whether the concubines themselves weaponized court politics out of pure desperation. Some scrolls describe harem women as cunning and ruthless. Others paint them as victims caught in a labyrinth of imperial indifference. You know, the truth is more complicated. It's both. One week, the palace is flooded with gossip, a low-ranked concubine caught smuggling opium to calm her nerves. Another accused of using sorcery to draw the emperor's attention. The latter disappears. The former is publicly caned, her face swollen beyond recognition. You avert your eyes, not because you're squeamish, but because it could so easily have been you. Even your meals are tested now. Not out of concern, but to keep up appearances. The food taster, a solemn girl with dark eyes, never speaks. She eats a sliver of everything before it touches your lips. You sometimes wonder how many of her predecessors lived long enough to retire. One afternoon, you find a slip of paper in your poetry drawer. No handwriting, just a pressed moth wing. You burn it instantly. That's a message coded and old as dynasties. Someone wants to form an alliance or warn you. Your maid tells you offhand that Lady Dewdrop hasn't been seen in 2 days. You feel an icy tremor in your ribs. It's happening again, but this time you're not just a bystander. You're a possible suspect. After all, you were once in favor. People assume you must still carry some hidden power. And if not, well, it's safer for others if you disappear anyway, so you stay quiet. You nod, smile, and paint your face with steady hands. At night, you lie awake listening to the padded footsteps of eunuchs in the halls, wondering if they'll stop outside your door. You begin to hoard small things, plum seeds, sandalwood splinters, paper scraps. Not for escape, that's impossible, but for something. A ritual, a spell, a final moment of control. One evening, as you attend a ceremonial dinner in the Moon Pavilion, you see the Empress glance your way. Her gaze is brief but precise. Not affection, not disdain. Calculation. You know what that means. It means she sees you as a chess piece again, which means you're in danger. Because in this game, when pieces stop being useful, they're swept from the board. You fake a fainting spell that night. Just enough drama to seem fragile, not enough to raise concern. The court physician prescribes rest. You stay in your quarters, feigning weakness, letting the latest rumors burn out without your presence fanning the flames. It works, for now. You survive another moon cycle. Lady Dewdrop returns. Thinner, quieter. Her laugh is gone. You catch her staring at nothing, sometimes fingers twitching at invisible threads. Whatever she endured, it changed her. She doesn't look at you anymore. You both know it was never personal. It's just the cost of survival. And you've learned to keep your tea lukewarm, your words lukewarm, and your ambitions stone cold. You wake up one morning and realize no one said your name in weeks. Not your title, not your courtesy name, not even the whispered pet version the Emperor once used when he was still bothering to remember your face. There's no drama this time. No scandal, no exile, no poisoning. Just silence. You're still alive, still in the palace, still technically a concubine, but you've slipped off the chessboard, forgotten in plain sight. You wander the garden in early spring, watch the magnolia buds split open like yawns. No one joins you. No one stops you. You are invisible now, which ironically is the safest you've ever been. This is what they don't write in the court records, that most concubines don't die in fiery scandal or dramatic exile. They just fade, forgotten, alive but erased. It's called cold storage. a real term used in the Qing dynasty. Concubines who fell out of favor were relocated to remote palace buildings stripped of duties rarely spoken to again. The imperial household had a word for it, like you were a jar of pickled lotus root, a thing to be shelved. Your quarters shrink, fewer attendants, duller meals. You try writing poetry, but the metaphors feel stale. You hum old lullabies, though no one's listening. There's a legend that if a concubine bore no children and was not summoned for more than 300 days, her name could be removed from the jade registry. You look at your palms, sometimes wonder if your own name has already vanished from some scroll. Historians still argue whether concubines in this phase retained any formal status. Some say they were still protected. Others think they were effectively prisoners cloaked in dignity, but with no agency at all. You know the truth, it's neither. You're a memory with a heartbeat. A few younger girls try to make conversation with you. They giggle behind fans and ask if the emperor really prefers mango pudding. You smile, say nothing. You don't want to curse them with attention. One day you visit the shrine pavilion where ancestral tablets are stored. A dusty corner lists the honored consorts of emperors past. You scan the names. None of them ring a bell. How many were like you, passed over, childless, exiled to silence? A few must have mattered rose to Empress Dowager or Mother of the Crown Prince, but the rest, ghosts with powdered cheeks. And what if you had borne a son? That's the cruelest twist. Then maybe your name would be inscribed in bronze, but only because of him. Your value retroactively defined by someone else's success. You think of Lady Plum, who gave birth to twins. One died in infancy. The other became a general decades later. Only then was her portrait restored, her resting place upgraded. But she never lived to see it. They buried her in a pauper's robe. Still, you remember the stories from your village, how people whispered that old concubines' ghosts haunted palace wells and curtain rooms, brushing sleeves across lanterns and laughing just beyond earshot. That kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl and heart ache at once. Maybe they weren't wrong. You begin to believe that living long in the Forbidden City is its own curse. You've outlasted rivals, scandals, and even trends. But now even the politics have passed you by. Once a eunuch brings you a tray and flinches when you say thank you. He'd thought you were another maid. You wonder how many still know who you are. You start referring to yourself in the third person in your journal. She walked the southern corridor today. She waited by the east pond. Not to be poetic, just because you feels too bold, too alive. You try to remember the last time you touched someone out of affection, or were touched, and that's when it hits you. You haven't cried in years, not once. You want to, but the tears just won't come. There's nothing left to mourn, because grief requires something being taken from you, and everything you once had has already turned to mist. One spring festival, the Emperor's new favorite barely 14 waves at you across the Lotus Bridge. She calls you Auntie. It's meant to be respectful. You bow with a serene smile, then walk away before your hands can tremble. That night in the quiet of your chamber, you light a single candle and speak your full name aloud. Just once. No one hears, but you do, and that has to be enough. The day they bury you, the palace barely notices. You don't die in disgrace. There's no poison, no exile, no whisper of scandal. Just old age, or what passes for it in a world that eats women young. Your death is recorded in neat brushstrokes on a scroll no one reads twice. A minor concubine, long unvisited, expired in her sleep during the 10th watch of the night. Your name, if it's still in the registry, is written without flourishes. No titles added, no poems commissioned. No ancestral spirit tablet carved. The other concubines do not mourn. Most never knew you. The few who remember are wise enough not to say your name aloud. Because in this place, memory is dangerous. But you're not free yet. Even in death, your fate belongs to someone else. The palace decides what happens next. Were you favored in life? A son-bearing consort. Then you might be granted a small ceremonial tomb, sealed with jade tiles and a brief inscription. Not near the emperor, of course, not unless your womb made you indispensable, but close enough for symbolic status. But you no children, no recent favor, no recorded contributions. So they take you to the cold pit. It sounds more dramatic than it is. Really, it's just a mass grave. A sectioned-off trench beyond the outer walls where low-ranking women, unwed court ladies, faded concubines, unwanted maidservants are laid in plain coffins. No incense, no chants, just soil and silence. Historians still argue whether this burial custom was meant as punishment or practicality. Some say it was an act of bureaucratic efficiency. Others suggest it reflected the unspoken hierarchy of death, who gets remembered and who just gets buried. Either way, you don't get to haunt a lacquered chamber or lie in a silk-wrapped tomb. You get dirt. You get forgotten, and maybe, just maybe, your ghost lingers. Some believe that concubines who died unacknowledged were doomed to roam the palace for centuries, trapped in limbo. Not angry spirits necessarily, just curious ones. Watching, waiting, hovering near courtyards where children laugh or behind curtains during royal dinners. There's a belief that if you light a lantern in the Forbidden City and whisper your secrets, a concubine's ghost will listen and maybe for just one moment remember her own name again. It's a sweet thought, almost comforting, but not true, because the truth is harsher. You are erased, not by malice, but by design, and so you vanish, not with a scream, not with a bang, but like the last drop of perfume on a faded robe. And yet, something of you survives. The echo of your footsteps in empty corridors. A crease in a poem written on rice paper. A ripple in the garden pond that no one can explain. You lived once. You waited. You hoped. You played the game even when it played you back. And while the world forgets you, this story does not. You're here now, alive again, if only in this quiet hour suspended between breath and bedtime. So if you're still awake listening beneath warm blankets, maybe look out your window one last time. Imagine that far beyond the moonlight, in the deepest part of an ancient walled city, a woman just like you once stood head high, heart quiet, watching the plum blossoms fall. And she was real. Word count 1 row 16. Wind down 300 words. The palace quiets now. The shadows stretch across painted tiles and the lanterns sway in rhythms too slow to measure. You've walked so far tonight through silk chambers and courtyards lost to time. Through longing and silence. Through beauty, cruelty, and the soft footfalls of a woman made invisible. But it's okay to let that weight slip now. You've made it to the edge of the garden. There's a bench beneath a pine tree, smooth from years of sitting, creaking faintly in the wind. Sit there a while if you'd like. The air smells of jasmine and wood smoke. The kind of air that doesn't ask anything of you, just lets you be. And listen, do you hear it? That soft background hum. Not ghosts, not history, just the gentle hush of everything continuing. Of petals falling, of time turning, of women like you finally resting. You are more than your rank, more than your silence, more than the names they forgot to carve. And now, as your own breath slows and the story folds itself closed like a silk fan, just know you're not alone. Not really. You were seen tonight, heard, remembered. Now go ahead. Let your eyes drift shut. You're safe. You're home. And the palace will still be there waiting in dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.